Going. Okay, I push the button. Recording. All right, let me just see. So the format with today we talk about this is for our multinational, enormous audience all over the world that we are discussing on our Perplex group, English speaking Perplex group, every Tuesday. Various topics that could be controversial, and yet we develop the format that controversy is respectful. We want to know another person or person's view, not really to tell them how uneducated or limited their knowledge is. That's not our goal, because we always assume that another person knows something more than I do, and it's just complementary to each other. So this is just for everybody, our Zoom coordinates: 325-804-5811, password 285775. And there's my show, because sometimes people ask me, how do I get to your Zoom? You never show the coordinates. So I just put it so people can stop the screen recording. So today is Tuesday.
You have to read here.
Right. Well, but whoever reviews a view, they can pause it and read it and jot it down. So
true.
So today is May 9th, Victory Day against Nazism. It's a good time for us to do it. And we in Israel, as always, going through the challenging times of our neighbors and our brethren, sometimes disagreeing with our views. So we have sometimes a little bit heated, quote unquote, exchange. So we have many reasons to discuss it and present things lovingly and respectfully to each other. So May 9th, 2023, year 5,783, depending by which calendar you go. So we're going to talk. I had trouble finding somebody who will talk about against judicial reform in Israel. There are several people who say, yeah, I am for the reform. And I was kind of surprised, because you see on TV, 100,000 people protesting. So I think, listen, if we want to have somebody come and tell us what exactly you don't like about reform, will be 100,000 people willing to do that. And I had troubles to find one. So I have taken the view today. John will take the view of for the reform, and I will take the view against the reform. And I have to tell you that in my view, again, this is just my view, and I'll have like about 10 minutes and I'll pass it on to John. In my view, I find that most people with a pro-reform or against reform fall into continuity. It's not like for people and against people. If you mark from a 0 to 10 people who want to do reform, and 10 really have to do it today, 3 I want to do it but I'm not sure. So it's a degree of desire to do it from 0 to 10, and people against it from 0 to -10. Some say no reform, forget it, just stop it. Some people say, yeah, I want to do reform, but maybe in this form or in this format. So opinions vary, but extreme, somewhere 9 and 10 or -9 and 10.
You forgot one kind of people, and that is those who think that the reform should have been done a year ago.
A year ago, 5 years ago. Yeah, that's true. So, but basically, people on the extremes normally, and I don't know, is that 5% of people, 10 or 50 or 90, really don't know what it's all about. Some people say, well, that's basically religion. Ultimately, it's religious against non-religious. People want to see the secular Israel, and people like to see a religious Israel. Or this is all about Netanyahu. We want him to be gone. No, he's the best guy there is. No, we want him. And anything in between. So people have their views and opinions diversified. So I'm going to now present my view why reform shouldn't take place. I don't exactly feel that myself personally, but I cannot put myself into the camp of people who say, no question about it. If reform today should pass, it should definitely pass. I can't state that. So let me talk about I'll present an opinion, and I hope respectfully, and I believe I understand the view and respect the view of people who want to have reform. I'm not against their views. I think they make a good point. But I don't want to dismiss very easily opinion. I don't agree with people who block highways and create havoc. I don't think that's a good thing. But fundamentally, to express opinion, the reform shouldn't be done, or maybe it shouldn't be done in the same way, or shouldn't be done by some kind of a national census and discussion, dialogue. that kind of dialogue discussion about it should take place. So let me take I'll switch my hat into the against reform. And this is what I would say. I mentioned it before, and in the note I sent to you, everybody, I included two discussions we had before, in which, and I'll only take 2 minutes on that. I'll share the screen. First, I have to share the screen. Where I share the screen, here we share, and then okay, here. Okay, where's this? Okay, it is over there. Okay, guys, you see the chart, right?
Yes.
You see.
Yeah.
Okay. So on this chart, there's a four things. On the left side here, this is and I go through this for by on a minute. This is a system of the ancient Israel. On the right side, this is a system of the current, present Israel. On the bottom, lower left here, this is an American system. And the lower right is basically A, B, C, D are grades of the sifting down of the morality or the rules of the society from the highest level to the lower level, if you will. A is a guidance level in quotes. Like in ancient Israel, that guidance level was basically God. And then the God would flush into the Torah and Halacha. So the A, basically God and Torah and Halacha, was basically the ultimate thing, if you will. Then B is the action level. There was a government. In ancient Israel was a king, and king had many ministries. Minister of the environment, minister of sports, minister of the war, blah, blah, blah. They did things, and they passed the laws, and they did what they did in a kingly way, if you will. Then C is a court. There was a court, Beis Din, who basically put checks and balances on how far can really get away with some things. And then on the lowest level, if you can call it lowest level, was D, the people. So basically the morality or the rules of society was coming from the upper level down to people. And overall, there was not much confrontation or disagreement or how it should be. Everybody, and of course, we know the history of Israel. We screwed up many times, but fundamentally, theoretically, it was a harmonious method. There was no questions on Beis Din. There is no God. The king didn't question that. The people didn't question that. Knesset Gadola, scribes, the sages, and the prophets didn't worry about the Torah should be written or negated. So society basically didn't have a conflict with the structure overall. There was a fights back and forth and disagreement. Overall, there was a structure. In the present day Israel, God does not exist as an established and official legal entity. He does exist with indirect dash line to people. I mean, people in Israel are very observant. Even secular people like come to the mall and touch the mezuzah on the wall. But basically, that is unofficial line. But the highest level of we don't have a Torah highest level, but we have Declaration of Independence, from which fundamentals law sort of are meant to be, depending on the opinion, guide equivalency of the halachic structure of the Israel. And then there is a government. Instead of a king and his ministries, we have a Knesset. Knesset, government, and the president, all their things in green or in blue basically makes the law just like a king was. And then there is a Supreme Court who takes checks and balances to make sure that government doesn't conflict with a fundamental thing. In this case, in ancient Israel, the Beis Din wants to make sure that the king doesn't violate what Torah really says. That's the check and balances. In the present Israel, the Supreme Court, the idea would be make sure the government doesn't step the boundaries over the higher level. Higher level to them is not God, because in 1948, the state of Israel was not established as a religious society, but a democratic society. So the Supreme Court basically wants to make sure that there's no conflict between some higher thing. And what is that higher thing? It becomes a controversy. Is it Declaration of Independence? Is it something else? Either what the court itself decides, they sit down together with a cup of coffee and say, no, this law is no good, strike it down. In the American system, just briefly before I finish to this, essentially also there is God. There's also indirect line to people. But it's more vague because in America, it's not just Judaism. They also have Christianity and whatnot. So there's no uniform God that people, at least here, we don't question which God we're talking about. In America, God is sort of on the sidelines, but the Constitution of the United States came out by the founding fathers, essentially, and is similar to what you would say halacha was for the ancient Israel. The analogies are very vague I'm presenting, but just to get the point. And there's a Congress, which is like king here, Knesset here, Congress here, with a Senate and a House of Representatives and the president. And then there's a Supreme Court who wants to make sure that the Congress doesn't get away with murder, quote unquote, because if a conflict with Constitution takes place, the Supreme Court say, hold it, Constitution says you cannot do that. So there's a similarity. They're not exactly identical, but similarity between the upper level or lack of, then the level of the action, king, government, Knesset, and then the level of the holding points. So my point is this. Now, why would I say not to have reform? And of course, the very explanation I'll give probably also not clear even to myself. I'm not 100% knowledgeable either, and many people are not, unfortunately. But I feel because we're not in ancient Israel, we don't have a charter. We're not empowered to make a decision like they would do in ancient Israel. We have in a state of Israel people who are very religious, not religious at all, and anywhere in between. So we cannot say just because we democratically or semi-democratically or whichever way elected the government, and if 60% elected the government, it doesn't necessarily mean that means, well, if you elected the government, sorry, the government now is empowered to make decisions. Don't stop the government to make the law. It is the job of the government to make the law, not the job of the court. That is true. However, that only would be true, in my view, as I'm against reform simulation presenting here, that will be only true is a society was mostly uniform, not very polarized. But when society is polarized, then the government cannot really make a point that just because we won, you do what we say, because democratic society functions like that. In other words, if we have 10 people, of which 7 rule that we can smoke, and the 3 guys do not want to smoke because they have asthma, the ones that won, 7, have a right to smoke, but they really shouldn't, because they will be usurping on the right of the 3 people that are just not nice. The same analogy is here. I'm not now referring to American system, because an American system, basically the Supreme Court using Constitution as the reason. And even in America, when the Supreme Court judges rule, it's not always 9-0. It's 6-3 or 5-4. It's still, so they still don't interpret the same upper document uniformly. They still argue even among themselves. So my point now is this. I come to a conclusion and pass to John to give counterpoint to mine. Yes, Supreme Court in Israel, consisting of people that really are, in my opinion, sometimes too theoretical, and perhaps they don't have the, the guy can spend the whole year as a researcher of a law, and now he decides to tell the Knesset or the government that you cannot do that because I don't think it's right. I don't think they're really qualified to do that. But unfortunately, they have to do it because somebody has to have a power to stop the government from running away and be insensitive to the views of the minority, a big minority, by the way, 40% perhaps, that might not disagree with elected majority that wants to make the law. So even the Supreme Court of 10 judges, 20 judges, whatever number of Supreme Court judges will be, are really maybe even arrogant and maybe not respectful, and they just think they know better than anybody else. Even if that's the case, I'm not saying it is or not, but even if that's the case, it's still in the present Israel good to have somebody, even they just went to colleges, to Yale and Harvard of Israel, and decided we're very smart and we'll tell you this law is constitutional. You cannot destroy the house in a Samaria or somebody else, or you cannot do this law. Even if they do it without really good reference on why, on which basis you're making that decision, even then you have to unfortunately give them the right to stop the majority. And in Israel, unfortunately, we know. In Israel, we don't have a very strong system of talking to somebody and agreeing to consensus. Usually it's my way or the highway. And because it's my way or the highway, the government sometimes says, listen, I don't have time to talk. I don't have the time to make national consensus and to find what people want. Okay, we won. This is the law. Don't like it. Go to Denmark. That is not the right attitude. So I think fundamentally, those of us who would want to have reform should probably listen to that and say, listen, maybe we move a little bit too fast. Maybe we should stop back and have a discussion. Take a little time. We don't have to make reform today. We don't have this urgency to do it today. Let's wait until people understand. Let's have a meetings. Let's have a meetings like we have here, so people can discuss and present their views and understand the details exactly what needs to happen. And in that sense, that Supreme Court should continue functionally, even though it's usurping the power and does it illegally, so to speak. Even in that sense, the decision, and I would think that those people who say reform should be, or Israel should become more religious, probably right. But I think they have to give it a time element and wait and pray until God Almighty eventually will come in and help us. And God probably also needs us to have time. And for that reason, I'm presenting the view that the reform right now, especially in the state that it is, and not clear to majority of people, should hold on, not cancel, but hold on, and instead of national discussion, polite, respectful to another opinion should start taking place. This is just my view. So I don't know. You guys agree?
I think it's time to hand it over to John.
John, take it over from here. Now,
okay.
John will take us
well,
forward.
Well, first I want to say thanks for inviting me. It's the first time I've been part of a podcast like this. I must say, Lev, that was very, very way of making your case. I did not expect that. It was very interesting. I think you made some very good points. There's one really big problem with your argument, I think, and that is that the Supreme Court, as important as it is to have checks and balances in a government, and that in our current system, the Supreme Court is supposed to be a check on the government, that check really seems to only work one way. There's a reason that it is a right-wing government that is pushing for reforms right now. There's a left-wing. We have had many left-wing governments for a very long time. Not one has ever pushed for any judicial reform, such as is being pushed for now. So as an example of this, in the selection of judges, there's a sorry. There's a committee to select judges. I believe it has 11 people, including 2 people from the Knesset, 2 from the government, a certain number of people from the Israeli Bar Association, and some number of people who are actually on the Supreme Court. And the idea is that they are all supposed to sit down and discuss and argue over who is fit to be a judge, who is qualified. But so the idea is that no sitting government can appoint judges willy-nilly, and they need compromise with the Judges Bar Association. But compromise seems to all necessary for right-wing governments. Last government, which is probably somewhat left, on our last government, the committee appointed 61 judges in a single sitting. I don't think anyone actually believes that they could have an actual discussion about every single one of those judges. I don't think so.
You'll be froze, John.
We seem to have lost him.
John, you there?
Yeah, I'm not. I'm missing half of what he's saying. It's not. It's very choppy.
Hi, I got disconnected. I don't know where the problem is. Might be me.
Okay.
So what was the last thing you heard?
You're saying
It
the
was all
judges
very
should not,
choppy.
the judges should not be usurping the power because they have too much power.
The last thing we heard was that how on earth could they have approved and talked about so many judges in just one sitting?
Thank you.
61 judges.
Yeah, 61 judges
When-
in a single sitting. That is one example of
16 or 61?
61.
What?
And
Where
what-
was that?
60
What?
plus
What?
one.
What? Where was that?
It was here in Israel. It was under the last government.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So, but let's leave aside the issue of party politics for now. The big issue for me with the system is simply this. We have, for the most part, unelected officials being selected, mostly unelected officials, to hold vast and far-reaching power to strike down any act by our democratically elected representatives based pretty openly and explicitly on nothing but their own opinion. The concept of reasonableness in the Israeli judicial system has been stretched very far, to the point that many former Supreme Court justices are talking out against it, because it's been pushed to the point that it's entirely subjective. There is no legal definition of it. There is a legal definition of it, but there's no actual deal to the legal definition of it, and can be by the Supreme Court, just
You're a little choppy again, John. Okay.
So here's what really scares me about this. Okay? In the current
Oh, okay. We lost him.
Yeah.
You froze, John.
I
He's
think
not.
he's gone.
Is it okay? Okay.
John, do you have any place in your apartment or house which has better Wi-Fi? Because we are having difficulty getting you.
I don't think so. I'll try. Excuse me a minute.
Okay.
Hello, looking for a place with better Wi-Fi. Keep dropping out.
It may be a left-wing conspiracy trying to shut you down, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. They
All right,
know
so
how to
I'm
do that.
literally sitting under the Wi-Fi. If there's anywhere with a better connection than here, I don't know about it.
So far it's good. So far it's good. Try it again.
Okay, cool. Right. So in our current system, if the Supreme Court does some action that is patently wrong, something like, say, the Dred Scott decision in U.S. history, there's literally nothing that we, the common citizens, or our elected officials, our elected representatives, can do about it. Literally nothing. So a lot of the people arguing against reform are saying the Supreme Court needs to be left free to, as it is, to protect democracy. That is what most people that I know of, at least, are saying against it, are saying this is not a democratic process. This is almost the exact opposite of democracy. And So I, for one, believe that democracy is very important, and just about the single most defining part of democracy is that non-elected officials are subject to elected officials. Now, checks and balances are very important. I don't know if I said that already, but in our current system, the checks and balances are completely out of whack. There is no objective rule for how and when they are applied. They are being applied by people who are officially and absolutely not, what's the word? Not to the authority of common people. That this is not democracy. This is not a system that can reasonably as what's the word? Reasonable. Not, well, I'd had a root canal and I'm still a little drugged up.
Well, that's the best time to present to that presentation, usually because you're not responsible for this saying. The Perplexed Club is notorious for that. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll say just one further point. Currently, Lev made a very good point that reforms of this kind should be taken over a long period of time. There should be a certain amount of discussion. There is a certain amount of discussion. This is taking time. There are many different proposals are being talked about and are being considered. And all the proposals, at least the ones that I've seen, do leave the Supreme Court to continue operating as a check on the government and the Knesset, albeit in some ways in a reduced capacity. And I must say that there are some proposed changes that I disagree with. I definitely see some problems with proposed changes, but some kind of reform is necessary. And going back to party politics, at the moment at least, there is one side of our political divide that is willing to work on making reforms, and the other side is not. And so that is why it is taking place now. And the good Lord willing, like Lev says, there'll be discussion and open debate, and we can all come up to the best possible conclusion.
That's excellent. That's open to the questions and discussions. But I just want to say this is an example. The two views, for against, came out to be friends. I would like to meet with John and buy him a cup of coffee, and I'm sure he wants to do the same thing because we still love and respect each other. We're Jews who care for each other. No matter how we look on reform, that's a civil and respectful discussion. Okay, guys, comments.
Well, I think it's obvious why the left calls it anti-democratic, because their idea of democracy is you agree with me. And they think the religious are superstitious idiots, and they think the Sephardim are just plain idiots. And therefore they can't run a democracy, and therefore if they get their way, it'll become anti-democratic, which in other words, but really what it is at the bottom is they've had control for so long that they're horrified at the thought of giving up the control. Also, there's a very strong religious element in the country, and a lot of people are afraid of having too many religious restrictions. So they call it anti-democratic. It's all nonsense. It's all yellow journalism and lies and obfuscation.
Well, Rob, I was bringing against reform position. Is that what you took for my presentation? I called people nuts and stupid and non-democratic. Did you hear that? Did I say that?
No, I think that's it. Most people who are yelling that's anti-democratic. That's the unspoken. That's the unspoken narrative that they won't say out loud because it sounds racist. but it's I think that's the unspoken narrative. They're afraid of the Sephardim and the religious taking over the country, and also, for leftists, the politics is their religion. It's easy to get people to yell and scream about their religion. People on the right have their own religion, and politics is secondary. But for these people, this is their religion. And to get the wrong prime minister is like having the wrong pope. It's
Rob,
it makes them crazy.
I have to jump in, but again, you're criticizing position that you are assuming that's what people say, that's your take, but that's not what I said. Today we have a one pro, one against, and you didn't get it. I would wish you guys also find the deficiency as John
Just to answer what you said, I think your logic is much more reasonable, and if everybody on the left was talking like you, I think we could talk about it reasonably. But I think what happens is, like often happens in Israel, is whoever screams and yells and loudest and longest wins the argument.
I see David can't wait to jump in. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I hate to be the one who brings the news, but the situation is actually far worse. It has absolutely nothing to do with God, and it has absolutely everything with trying to destroy the Jewish state. The Supreme Court is divided into, it's the same 15 judges acting both as Supreme Court, Beit Mishpat Elyon, and Bagatz. So the Bagatz, that is the problem. The Beit Mishpat Elyon is it's the highest it's the highest level for appeals and that kind of thing. The Bagatz, that is the part of the Supreme Court that is the should be the balance to the government, right? So the problem with the Bagatz is that it has, in the last 30 years, it has become a group of people, not only judges. It's not only judges. The judges are the creme de la creme. They are the ones who actually well, they do, right? They are the ones who because they give the sentences and they give the orders, the legal orders, etc. They're the ones like they lead. But it's not only judges. It's hundreds of people, lawyers, all sorts of people in the legal system and in the government who have an agenda that is anti-Zionist and anti-Israeli. And their agenda is to make Israel a country which is non-Zionist, which means a country that is completely contrary to the Declaration of Independence. They actually cannot stand the Declaration of Independence because the Declaration of Independence speaks of the state for the Jewish people. And what they want is a kind of America or a kind of Britain where all citizens are equal. They basically are pushing for a republic to eliminate the Jewish majority and to eliminate the ability of the Jewish majority to act as this is, to act as if this is the Jewish country, and then to physically eliminate the Jewish majority. This is the agenda to basically destroy the Jewish Zionist state. This has nothing to do with any values at all. We have to forget about it. This is an attempt to destroy this country, period. Period. I am 46 years old. I was born to a different country. And I don't know how much I gotta live, but let's say I'll be 80 years old in about 35 years. I don't know what country will I see when I'm 80. I'm not sure it's going to be the same country. At all. At all. This is an attempt to destroy Zionism completely and to eliminate all rights of the Jews in the Jewish country. And to understand what is the agenda, you have to understand what Zionism is. Zionism is basically an ideology that says this is a place where Jews can live and be themselves without any persecution, without being pogromed, without being killed and murdered. And this is a place for them that is safe. Okay, so in the left-wing language, this is a safe space for Jews.
Mhm.
And the Supreme Court and the progressive left have an agenda to destroy this Jewish safe space. This is what this is all about.
They're internationalists. They want everybody to be
Absolutely.
all the same, and
Absolutely.
everybody get along.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're
Gentlemen,
talking about human rights. Human
Yeah.
rights overshadow Jewish rights. Zionism is
Yeah.
Jewish rights.
Gentlemen, let me jump in just because simply it's minute and 30 seconds we have left. Let me just do this. Unfortunately, we can't have Jonathan and Harvard mentioned because of time run out. First of all, I want to thank everybody to participate. And again, I mentioned many times before, I say it again, that's a format, in my view, to discuss it. It's a very controversial subject, but you look at us. The six of us didn't go and block the highway one way or another. We discussed the view. We agree to
We're on the
disagree,
same side.
and we no, not necessarily. I'm not sharing everybody's view, and that's okay. So for the next Tuesday, every Tuesday at 8 o'clock Israeli time, we'll continue this. What I want to tell you guys, any particular topic you would like to discuss next Tuesday, we can expand and continue this, or
Well, I'd suggest we continue this. I think we should cull some characteristic news clippings from the papers, from the left and the right, see what they're actually saying, compare them.
But also, Rob, I think if we know somebody who actually does present the quote-unquote left position against reform, it would be nice if somebody would agree. I'm disappointed that nobody wants to come. Not many people don't want to come. And I present the against reform position. I try to present it civilly. I don't think my position as a not have a reform, it was not extreme. But it would be nice to have somebody who has more extreme position, but still is able to articulate it politely and disagree.
I find